Welcome to part two of Race and Slavery. Now we're going to talk about perceptions of Africans. Now the perception of Africans amongst Europeans and then eventually Americans, it's not a positive one. When Europeans looked at Africans, they saw them as heathens, right? They looked at their culture and said it was, well, this culture is primitive. And it really wasn't primitive, it was just different, right? I mean, when you take a look at the African nations, they had kingdoms and they had kings, they had monarchies, a lot of the things that you saw in Europe, but they were different, and so they were seemingly backwards, and so they said their culture was primitive. Now, of course, their skin color was black, and they would use that term black, right? And skin color was the most important, but it was most important because it was the most obvious, right? It was the thing that really stood out the most. But the use of that word black actually has some connotation of its own. Historically, the word black had developed a negative connotation, right? For example, in the 1300s, black was beginning to be used in conjunction with a term meaning something that was soiled or stained with dirt, right? But then it would get, by the 1580s, even more so. You would start using black in terms with something that was dark or of deadly purposes, right? Dark deeds or black deeds, right? You'd start to see things like that, right? And then by the 1700s, you get the kind of a psychological aspect added to it when black means things like sorrow or gloomy, in a black mood, right? Or black days, these kind of things, right? But this connotation is all negative, and so this connotation can precondition people towards certain prejudices against those who are called black, right? Now, psychologist John E. Williams described this once in 1966 when he said, although admittedly convenient and seemingly innocuous, the practice of color coding may have hidden and perhaps undesirable effects, since color names such as white and black are regularly used in other contexts as general cultural symbols of goodness and badness. It seems like the consistent association of a color name such as black with a racial concept as Negro would tend to condition the connotations of the former to the latter. In that way, the practice of color coding might operate as a background factor in the development and maintenance of attitudes towards racial groups, right? He says it actually promotes prejudice, the use of this color term, and this underlining historical connotation that gets attached to it. Black has a connotation of negativity, and white, being the opposite, therefore has a connotation of something positive. So the Europeans in general, and the English in particular, would apply this connotation to their perception of Africans, right? When they looked at the Africans, they said clearly Africans are more closely related to apes, right? Matter of fact, some even went so far as to suggest that they were the product of bestiality, humans and apes, right? And so therefore they are more like animals. And that will permeate English society, and therefore that will find its way over into the American colonies as well, right? Matter of fact, that will go all the way through into the modern era. This picture I'm using here is actually from the eugenics movement in the United States in the 1920s, in which you see this evolutionary chain being drawn out, and then of course you see a chimpanzee followed by an African, and then followed by a European, right? In this case, a Greek athlete.